Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a book review for 206 Bones by Kathy Reichs. This is the 12th book in the Temperance Brennan series and my first introduction to the series. This is a procedural cop series about an anthropologist named Temperance Brennan. These are the books that the TV show Bones was based off of. And this book in particular deals with a mystery within the lab. I give this book 1 star. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but none of them are positive. This was pretty terrible in every way, shape, and form for me. It just was not a book that I got along with. And I do want to start with one caveat that this is my first introduction to the series. I've never read any of Kathy Reichs' books before. I've never read any of this series before. And I do think this was a particularly bad place to start in the series. And beyond any issues I have with the book, this was a lab mystery. It's not about a particular case that Brennan has. She doesn't find a body and then have to find the killer for that body. This deals with people within the lab and betrayal and sabotage and that kind of thing. And there are actually several cases within this book that don't really matter because the focus is on the mystery within the lab. And I think that makes it an especially hard place to start in the series because when you have a singular case, it's easy to get invested in that case, in that killer, in that victim. But for a lab mystery, when you don't really know the characters going in, when you don't know who these people are, it's harder to get invested in, like, interpersonal dramas and things like that. So, I did want to start with that. That was not my only issue with this book by far, but that was a fairly big one, and if you are interested in getting into the series, I definitely don't recommend starting with this book in particular. Like, definitely try to start earlier on. But getting into my actual thoughts, the other reason this book was particularly hard that had nothing to do with, like, the book itself was because Kathy Reichs does not do a particularly good job of introducing the characters, or at least, in my opinion, she didn't. I had no idea who any of these people were. I got the 2 main characters, which were Dr. Temperance Brennan, the main character, and Detective, I think was his title, Andrew Ryan. He is the Seeley Booth character in these books. I don't know why they changed his name for the show. Like, I knew the books were going to be nothing like the show, and that didn't bother me, but the fact that they changed his name is still weird to me. Like, why would you change his name? Why is Seeley Booth a better name than Andrew Ryan? I don't know. Whatever. That's not important. But they're the 2 main characters, and they're pretty much the only 2 characters that I got to know in this book. There were a myriad of other characters. Brennan has a daughter that she, like, goes on vacation with at one point in the book. She hangs out with her ex-husband's extended family, which was kind of strange and pointless. She has a former lover, ex-boyfriend, someone in North Carolina who she goes and hangs out with for a minute. And then, of course, there are all the people in the lab who I have no idea who they were. And the only reason I could even pretend to know who they were was just by imagining them as their counterparts to the Bones TV show, even though literally none of their names are the same, and from the way they were described, which is not much, it didn't really seem like their personalities were the same either, or that they were even, like, the same characters. Again, that's not the problem, it was just, I had no idea who they were. I couldn't tell you any names in this book apart from Temperance Brennan and Andrew Ryan, who were the 2 leads. Everyone else was just kind of a blur, and it wasn't just their names I forgot. I've forgotten their characters. I've forgotten their roles in the story. I don't even think I ever knew who they were. The people we get to know best, apart from the 2 leads, are Brennan's ex-husband's family, like his extended family, like his parents, his siblings, his cousins and aunts and whatever. Because Brennan hangs out with them for like 50 pages, and we get this very long backstory into them, which seemed entirely extraneous because then she left them because they were in Chicago. She left and went back to Canada, which is where this book is set, and they were never mentioned again. So it was kind of strange that they were just such a big part of the book for such a short period of time. And I do think that's one of those things you probably appreciate more if you've read this entire series. If you know these characters, you're like, oh cool, they came back for a minute. But as someone who has not read this series, who does not know these people, they just seemed very random and pointless. I do read a lot of procedural cop series out of order, because usually they're in such long series and the first books are fairly old that it really doesn't do much good to just, like, try to go all the way back to the beginning when you can just start, like, 10 or 12 books in and usually be fine. I've never really had this problem before where I didn't know these people. I didn't know who they were. Usually at the beginning, there's, like, a quick scene that's like, oh my god, these people are in this dramatic situation, or it's like a mundane family scene or whatever, and then they give you a summary of, like, the main character, anything from prior books that carries over and is important to this one, their family situation, their colleagues, and it's just like a page or two, a summary of all these things, which is not always the most interesting to read, but for these kind of books is necessary. And Kathy Reichs didn't do that. I don't think I got any summary on who the people who worked in the lab were, which was very strange because this was a lab mystery. So it was kind of important that we knew who was in the lab, but I didn't. I didn't know any of these people or anything that was going on or any of their relationships. One person was like, okay, I'm quitting, and everyone was sad, and then I was like, who are you? Like, I don't know who you are. I'm not sad or concerned, or everyone was like, this is weird that they're quitting out of the blue, and I'm like, is it? I don't know this person. And it was not well done in that regard. And I do get that a lot of that is me picking this up out of order, so I do take, like, responsibility for that, but usually in these books, they're written so that you can pick them up out of order, and this one definitely was not. And then to get kind of into the story of this book, the lab mystery. It took me until about halfway through this book to realize that's what the main plot was. Because at the beginning, she's like doing these different cases, and she's like, oh, I'm in Chicago, I find the dead body, and I'm going to investigate, and she does that for a minute, and then she like goes back to Canada for a minute, and like investigates a dead body there, and then she like goes to North Carolina on vacation with her daughter, and then like goes back to Canada, and it was very strange, and I was so confused because I was just bored and I didn't understand what the plot of this book was. And then once I figured out the plot, oh my god, it got worse almost. Like, it did get better knowing that there was a plot, that there was at least some sort of arc to this story, but the plot was just so bad. Apart from not knowing anyone in the lab, so not being at all invested in what was going on, the mystery was so easily solvable. And I'm probably going to get into, like, minor spoilers here, like, very minor, like, but I can't imagine not being able to predict the ending. There is one character who they constantly talk bad about. They constantly call them evil. They literally called them evil at one point in the book. Everybody hates them. Everyone's talking about what a backstabber they are. Everyone's talking about what a terrible, I don't know what their title was, anthropologist maybe that they were. Everyone hates them so unbelievably much. And yet, no one can figure out that they're the one behind everything. When it's like, just like this terrible evil person who's, and they're the one behind it. And like, of course they are. Part of the reason it took me so long to realize that was the main mystery of the book was because I kind of figured it out the first time they discussed it. And I was like, okay, this is going to be like some subplot. Where's the main mystery? And I was like, oh, that is the main mystery. It was obviously that person. And I don't know. I'm so confused as to why none of the characters could figure that out, because it was the most obvious thing. Like, it was so obvious and painfully predictable. And again, I don't mind predictable too much because I am pretty good at getting the ending of thrillers in advance. But in this, it was just like painful that none of the characters knew, and it was the most obvious thing in the world. And not just to the reader, but like for the characters. They were like, oh no, someone's backstabbing us in the lab. I don't know who it is. And then they would turn around and have another conversation and be like, oh, this character is such a backstabber. And it's like, how do you not figure this out? I really don't know. The other truly main reason this got 1 star was the writing style. I hate her writing style so much. Like, some of the plot issues and the character issues that I had, I can sort of put down to being the 12th book in a series that I haven't read. Not that I think I would love any of the other books because of the way this was written, but like, a lot of those issues, it's like, okay, that's kind of on me. I picked up the 12th book in a series. I'll take responsibility for that. But I hated the writing so much, and like, I won't be picking up any other books in the series just because of her writing. Like, the other books might be better than this, I don't know, but I hate her writing. It's so boring. She just has so much unnecessary description in this book. Like, so much unnecessary description. Brennan is an anthropologist, and sometimes she'll just go off for paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs about random things that are like related, and in cop mysteries, I do like seeing their logic to a degree. If she's like, oh, I can look at the pelvis and tell that the skeleton is male or female because of XYZ reason. It's like, that's cool. She's like, I can look at, you know, the forehead and tell that this skeleton is of this race because of XYZ reason. that's cool. But when she has 3 paragraphs about how the sternum forms, that's not interesting. I don't care how the sternum forms. Just tell me, like, the very basic overall details and not 3 paragraphs of how the sternum forms. I have no interest in that. And it wasn't just anthropology that she included unnecessary detail about. She had this whole long section about the Chicago Transit Authority. What did that accomplish? I don't know. They kind of left Chicago shortly after that, and it was never brought up again. At one point on page 99, when I actually considered DNFing this book, Brennan hears a town name, and she's like, when I hear that name, that reminds me of Mohawks, monks, and monastery cheese. And I'm like, that's weird and random. And then she literally went on for 2 pages about the Mohawks, the monks, and the monastery cheese. And that had literally nothing to do with anything. Just like 2 pages of random because Kathy Reichs had that information and wanted to share. But it had nothing to do with anything in the book. It wasn't like she was foreshadowing something. It was just completely random. And honestly, at that point, I kind of started skimming those sections. So it did get better later on in the book. But I don't know if that's because Kathy Reichs did any better, or if I would just like see a paragraph that obviously wasn't going to relate to anything and just skim it. I didn't do that until 100 pages in. But after the whole like bit on the monastery cheese, I could not handle that anymore. It was literally an entire page about nothing but monastery cheese. And like, people are getting murdered. There is a backstabber in the lab screwing things up, and yet we're discussing cheese that doesn't relate to anything. I don't know, it made me so mad. Like, this whole book made me so mad. And then there are some like other, I wouldn't say small things, but like smaller things that just kept this being 1 star instead of 2 stars. There's a fair amount of French in this book, and I'm not against having a second language in a book because it can be very interesting and I'm fine with it, whatever. But I dislike when there's not an immediate translation for it. And sometimes in this book there was a translation, sometimes there wasn't. And I think it added to my confusion because she would introduce someone and be like, this is so-and-so with their title in French, and maybe it would be like a basic French word, I don't know. But I speak literally no French. I can probably like say hello and goodbye and count to 3. And that's it. Like, that's literally it. I don't know any French. So it was frustrating when she would say, like, the name of a place in French. And, like, maybe it didn't matter. But then she wouldn't include a translation, so I wouldn't know what the name of the place was or what it meant. And, like, sometimes I could kind of, like, make a guess, but sometimes I couldn't. And I found that frustrating. Like, even if it's just, like, an asterisk and you just have the translation at the bottom of the page, that's fine. I don't care. I just want some kind of translation so that I know what I'm reading. I also thought Brennan was super annoying. She was just an annoying person. I understand why they completely changed her character for the show, because I could not have watched like 8 seasons of this character. She was the most annoying person. She would just be sitting in the lab all alone and be like, oh, I'm so sad. Like, I have no friends who want to hang out with me. There's no one calling me. Like, Andrew Ryan is not, he doesn't want to be with me. He hasn't texted or called me, and I'm just all alone and sad. And then Andrew Ryan would call and be like, yo, you want to hang out? And she'd be like, no, I don't want to hang out with you. You have to chloroform me to get me to hang out with you. And it's like, then why are you whining about it? Like, I get being torn because they had like a will they, won't they relationship, which was weird because like they clearly had already several times. And like, even just reading this one book, I was already getting tired of it. But I don't know, like, why whine about something? And then when you get it, you refuse it. And if it's like a 15-year-old character, sure, that makes sense for a 15-year-old. But she's clearly not 15. Like, she has an adult daughter. She must be like decently in her 40s, at least. And she was just like so immature and so annoying. And like, I don't know. I did not like reading from her at all. And then the ending was just the trope that like Brennan is super out of it when like the whole mystery is solved. She's like been kidnapped or whatever, which like we learned very early on because there are these random sections of italics that are like after she's been kidnapped and she's like trying to escape or whatever. I don't know. But then she winds up in the hospital, and because she's been like unconscious or kidnapped for the climax, she sits down with Andrew Ryan and they kind of explain the climax to each other, and they like explain everything that happened. And that's so boring to read. Like, I hate when thrillers wrap up that way. I would rather see the action happen. Like, this is the most exciting moment of the book. I want to see it happen. I don't want to hear people talking about it after the fact. I think that's boring. I hate that trope. I think it's just, like, a weak way to end a book. But, like, I already hated this book, so there was nothing that was going to save it. That was just kind of like, really? really, you're really gonna end it like that? But like, whatever. Honestly, I was just bored and confused this whole book. Like, so bored and so confused because her writing style is not the most clear cut, not in a way where she's like being roundabout and circular to make you think. It's just like, I don't know, she can't write or something, which I know, like, she wrote this book, she's very popular, plenty of people love her. Maybe this is just a bad book, like, maybe this one is terrible, but I did look up the ratings, and this has a pretty average rating for, like, her series. It's, like, not the lowest, not the highest, like, because I checked out a couple of the other books in the series, and they're all rated about the same as this, so maybe this is what all of her books are like, and I just really hate them. But this was not the book for me in any way, shape, or form. I couldn't stand this at all. I wouldn't say don't pick up the series just because, like, it's such a long series that, like, you really can't judge it by this book. Because this is book 12, and I think this was published in around 2009 or something. So, like, there may be 20 books in this series by now. I don't know. But I do recommend, if you are planning to pick up the series, definitely don't start with this book, because I just think this was a bad place to start all around. I hated this so much. This has been the worst book I've read of the year. Like, this was worse than Black Seconds by a long shot. Like, at least Black Seconds felt like a real book. At least the characters were people, even if, like, they were bad characters. Like, in here, it wasn't even like they were characters. They got a name, some of them, and that was it. So, yeah, 1 star. I don't recommend this book. I'm not going to be reading any more of the series. I'm kind of bummed that this was where I started in the series, because I do feel like it would have been at least slightly better if it had been, like, focused on one particular case, but I don't know. This is it for me. I'm not giving her another shot, because I hated this so much. Let me know down below if you've read the Kathy Reichs Bones series and what you thought of it if you have. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.